going through the legal aspects of real estate, studying for the realtor exam, and there's a section called how ownership is held in real estate. And I thought, hey, after I interviewed people for the past 3 years on Affordable Housing Podcast, I just wish someone would just sit down and just explain some of these things to me because I always think about what can I leave for our kids, right? It can't just be wealth. It's got to be the skills and information because that helps them get a head start on so many places. So today we want to talk about how ownership is held, and I'll try to come up with some very simple analogies because I really want you all to understand, hey, how do I use these properties, right? How do I use this information and apply it to everyday life, right? And I hope that one day my kids are going to buy their own home and they're going to have these same type of questions, right? So let's talk about the different ways that people can own property today, right? Again, it's not legal advice, it's not investment advice. I'm not soliciting any investments on this call. Just simply showing you all different ways on how I come up with analogies to explain it to my kids. And if you can't explain it, then you can't master it, right? If you can't teach it, you can't master it. So that's my goal. If you guys have better analogies that you think would be really helpful to explain these concepts to your kids, please let me know. So today, my goal is talking about the different ways that people can own property. And this is going to be really interesting because it's not just about yourself, because it could depend on how to share ownership. So let's talk about why this matters first, right? And how you hold title really matters because I think of property ownership like a team project. Sometimes you work alone, sometimes you share with the work with partners, sometimes you collaborate with a big group, and the structure you pick changes how decisions are made. Who pays for repairs? What happens if one person leaves, right? All these factors matter. So if you're buying a place with family and friends or you're part of an investment group, you're going to want to understand these structures up front. So let's first talk about, okay, let's talk about ownership and severalty. And that usually means it's like one owner, there's one decision maker. And when you have a single person or an entity that owns the entire property alone, that's called ownership and severalty. And this is the simplest form, right? You make all the calls, no one else has to say. It's almost as if you have your own treehouse and you have a keep out sign where only you have the key and only you decide how to build it and decorate it, right? That's what ownership and severalty means. Okay. Then there are three types of joint ownership structures. There's joint tenancy, there is tenancy in common, and then there is community property. So let's talk about the first one, joint tenancy. This is the most important part about this is that it includes something special called the right of survivorship. That means if one co-owner passes away, their share goes directly to the surviving owners. And that's important if you're married, etc. Then and you and your wife both hold title in joint tenancy, then if you die, it goes right to her or your spouse, right? But if you think about it, maybe you have four friends that built a treehouse, and if you chose this joint arrangement, if one leaves the neighborhood and they move away and never come back, then the three remaining kids probably will just take over the ownership of that treehouse, right? The second item was tenancy in common. And this is when each person owns a specific share of that property. But that share can be different sizes, right? So there's no automatic right of survivorship. So if someone passes away, right, their portion can go to whoever they choose, right? If I own a third of a home, I can say when I die, my third of the home goes to my kid, assuming they're 18 plus, can make decisions. Same thing as using this treehouse example again, right? If one person leaves, but then they can assign their corner of the treehouse to their sibling because they're moving away to go to college, or whatever, right? What's going to be most important and guiding principle here is that you have to decide up front what happens if so and so happens, because every partnership ends, right? And you want to decide up front when your heads are clear, when there's no emotions, so that you can decide how to avoid those fights down the road later. It's very, very important. Now, the third one was community property, and this is very applicable in some states, and that usually applies to married folks, where both spouses they share ownership of the property, especially if they acquired it during the marriage. It's almost as if you pulled everything in one big piggy bank, right? When you take your penny and your $100 bills and put in a piggy bank, you don't know who put that dollar or who put the $100 or put the dollar bill in that piggy bank, right? It just kind of gets muddled together. Same concept for community property. All right. So now that we talked about joint tenancy, tenancy in common, and community property, let's talk about what happens when someone leaves or passes away. So in joint tenancy, obviously the remaining owners they gain the departing person's share or the deceased person's share or whatever might happen that caused that person to leave. In tenancy in common, that share goes to whoever is designated in the will or the estate plan because they get to assign it. Okay. And in community property, if one spouse passes away, local laws or a will can usually affect how the property is distributed. So you got to be very, very careful about that. And I try to think about analogies, right? Imagine if you're trying to explain to a 10-year-old kid, imagine you and your sibling, you share a video game in a joint way, and your sibling moves away. Well, chances are you're going to keep the full game. That could be one way to think about it. All right, so now the big question is which one do you choose? And that's going to depend on your goals, right? If you want an easier path, if one of your co-owner passes away, joint tenancy can be pretty appealing. If you need flexibility in your shares or your ownership shares, and especially if you want to leave it to someone else, tenancy in common might actually be better. And if you're married in a region with community property laws, I mean that's just going to apply no matter what. So just understand, and this is so important, why you got to talk to your own attorneys, your own investment professionals, so you can understand exactly how the ownership changes and ebbs and flow depending on the structure you pick. All right, so I looked at the top search question around this, and the number one question was, what if we disagree on selling? So if you are in a joint tenancy or tenancy in common, if one owner wants to sell but the others don't, you might face a forced sale process. And that's where the court is going to order the property to be sold and you split the money. It's almost as if you and your friend can't share a stuffed animal anymore. You can't rip it in half because it would break, right? Maybe you just sell it and you divide up the cash. And you got that's why you always got to talk through these scenarios before you buy a place. You got to talk about how it ends. I can't emphasize that enough because all partnerships end. All right. So this is why all matters, right? Hopefully this was helpful for you. I mean, choosing how to hold title isn't just a technicality. It affects your taxes, your estate, how easy it is to transfer or sell the property. If you're buying with others or expecting any big life changes, do a little bit of homework. Pick the right arrangement, anticipating those future issues coming down the way, because it's going to come sooner or later. All right, so we talked about all this stuff, and I can't thank you all enough for just tuning in live with me for 537 days. I know sometimes I don't come up with the best analogies, but I'm really looking for better analogies from all of you. So leave a comment down below if you guys have any good analogies that you think could help explain how ownership is held. And I think that would be so cool because I want to be a great dad. And how I become a great dad is simply by learning how to teach all this information for all of our kids, all of ours. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for caring about affordable housing. Thank you so much for supporting the YouTube channel. I appreciate you all so much. Have an amazing Wednesday, guys. Hope you spend some quality time with your family and friends today. Because don't take that time for granted because you don't always get every single minute. Have a good one, everybody. I'll see you all tomorrow for day 538. Have a good one.